Over recent weeks, I've talked about the progress of the crisis, first the crisis and now the war in Ukraine. But today I want to talk purely about the effects of two very important markets and how they've been affected by that conflict in Ukraine. And those two markets are the market for oil and the other market that I want to talk about is the market for wheat. Saudi Arabia is the world's largest exporter of oil, but the second largest is Russia. But how do we model Russia in terms of its impact upon markets? In the most recently completed quarterly, which you will see will be available to the network on Monday, what you'll see is my updated model of the Brent price. And what you can see in that model is that the equilibrium price based on the level of stocks of product plus currency effect, which explains 80% of monthly variation of the Brent oil price, tells us the equilibrium Brent oil price should be $80 a barrel. When we look at the West Texas model, it's about $2 less than that. But the oil price is much higher than that. The price of Brent is about 124, and the price of West Texas is only slightly lower than that. So how do you account for the difference between the model of the oil price on fundamentals, stocks and currency effects, which explain most of what happens most of the time, and why the price is so much higher than that? And the difference between the two is war risk, and I want to define war risk into a simpler fashion for you. What has been happening over the last 2 weeks, as we know, that Russia has been subject to a number of sanctions, and that's affected really important things like its ability of its central bank to operate. There hasn't been a central bank which has been subject to sanctions, international sanctions, in the way that the Russian central bank is, since Germany was subject to those kind of sanctions in the First World War. It's more than 100 years since sanctions this severe have been done. But what else has happened is something that has nothing to do with sanctions. It's really, as somebody pointed out to me yesterday, perhaps an own goal of the Russians on themselves. One of the time-honoured ways of running a naval campaign is blockade, making it impossible for ships to load at your opponent's ports and take away their exports. Well, the Russians seem to have done this to themselves by generating a situation where the war risk is in the northern Baltic Sea is so high that it's impossible for ships to get insurance to enter the northern Black Sea and load either wheat or oil at Russian ports. So that means that you cannot get cargoes for Russian oil or Russian wheat loaded for export. And hence what that means is suddenly one of the world's largest exporters in both of those markets suddenly disappears from the market. And that is how you define war risk, and that is why that price is so much higher. This is something that the Russians have done to themselves, and it's this embargo on themselves which has driven the price up. We know about oil, and everybody has been talking about oil, but I want to just reflect upon the effect of what this is doing in the world wheat market. Russia is the world's largest exporter of wheat. It exports 37 million tonnes every year. The US is the second biggest exporter of wheat. It exports 26 million tonnes every year. The Ukraine, very interestingly, is the fifth. It exports 18 million tonnes every year. And Australia is the sixth. We export 10 million tonnes every year. The fact that there is this huge lift in the wheat price, now, what is that lift in the wheat price? Well, our equilibrium model for the wheat price, based on the same kind of things in our oil price model. It's based on the level of stocks that are expected to be available. It has currency effects in it as well. Currently, it's running at $814 a bushel, which is the highest level that the model has ever been in the many, many years that we've been running this model. But the actual price is $13 a bushel, $5 a bushel higher than that, or some 60% higher than the equilibrium price. And that's, of course, because the ability to load cargoes of Russian grain and Ukrainian grain is made impossible because of war risk, because ships can't insure themselves to load at those Black Sea ports to take those cargoes. Now, why this is important outside both of those countries and outside Australia is that we had an event quite similar to this, but not identical to this, in 2008, when we had the current low level of world stocks of wheat. We had an overshoot in the price. And at that time, that overshoot in the price generated world food riots. Food riots are pretty much throughout the developed world, particularly bad in Egypt, particularly bad in Pakistan, but in other countries throughout the developing world as well. So this problem, I expect, is going to repeat itself over the next month or so, as long as this problem of unable to load at northern Black Sea ports continues, that this price will overshoot, stay high, and that is going to generate shockwaves and food riots around the world. So the net result of this is it is not fundamentals, normal fundamentals, which are driving these prices high. It's war risk, and the war risk is the inability of ships to load cargoes of either Russian oil or Russian wheat or Ukrainian wheat at North Black Sea ports. And that problem will continue for as long as this war continues. I think it's a pretty good reason for Vladimir Putin to think about stopping this conflict as soon as he can as well.